Hello, everybody, and it's bright and early here in Manchester, and I'm pleased to say we're on the 202nd edition of the Frankenstein chat. And those watching on video will notice that Stan is missing. Missing, well, he's not missing on duty or whatever, but he's actually got something important going on elsewhere. So whenever that happens, we always lean on Kendra to come and join. So Kendra Allen's our co-host today. Hello, Kendra.
Hello, Frank. Hi, Alan.
Good
How?
morning.
So I'm wondering how many times has Kendra been on the Frankenstein chat? It's probably, it must be half a dozen times.
Yeah, I think it's
I
five or
think,
six
yeah,
now.
three times I think as a guest, and probably two or three times as co-host. Um,
Super sub as a guest.
Super sub,
Oh,
that's the title we need.
David Fairclough coming in, or Ollie Wilshaw.
Now
Super sub when anyone drops out.
that's a name from the past, David Fairclough, isn't it? So anybody
Yeah,
who's a Liverpool fan will know who David Fairclough is. But yeah, Alan. Now Alan, you've been a guest here. Is it twice before?
Twice before, yeah, with
Yeah.
Bryn. Yep.
Bryn. So going solo today, and I think you two are related. Is that correct?
we are first cousins.
First cousins. So I don't know. I think this is probably the first. Well, no, well, is this the first cousins arrangement that we've had? Possibly. Have you been on Kendra when Alan's been on before?
No,
Oh, well, it
no, we
could well be. Could well
no,
be.
No,
Anyway,
we've
we don't
discussed it a
often
few times.
perform.
No, no.
We don't
okay. So
perform together often, do we, Alan? And it's funny because as children we saw each other a lot. And Alan's mum, Auntie Joan, was the person who inspired me to become a teacher.
oh
She was a
wow.
brilliant early years teacher. And when we were in the sixth form, and you did, your Wednesday afternoon, you went and did something useful. I went into Auntie Joan's class and helped her put me off early years for life. Such the toughest, honestly, the
Yeah.
toughest teaching job in the world. I admire all early years teachers, but inspired me to be a teacher. And
Right.
then as we got older, you sort of go through years where you're not as in touch as much, but we're in touch again regularly now, aren't we?
Yeah, I mean, I will have to correct her, Stan, though, where she said we spent our childhoods together. I will say that Kendra did teach at the school I went to for a very short while, didn't you? You did
Oh
some
yeah, for
cover.
2 weeks. For two
So,
weeks.
so there is a little bit of a difference there. I am by far the younger cousin,
Yeah,
um,
no.
and
I
and
was a
it's
very young teacher, and Alan was towards the end of his secondary education.
I can believe that.
So
But
Alan, what?
I don't know whether you knew, no, Frank. It was Kendra's birthday yesterday,
Oh no, I did know that.
so
I
we
did
must
know
say
that.
happy
So happy
birthday to
birthday,
Kendra.
Kendra.
Oh, I became an old age pensioner
Oh, did
yesterday.
you?
I've had the heating allowance taken off me already. I've had the heating allowance taken off me when I've never had it. I'm also a waspy, so I should have been having my pension
uh,
for the last 6 years.
yeah. Well, my
But
wife's the
here I
same.
am. I finally achieved the status of old age pensioner.
Well, you'll never be the old in that. So anyway, Alan, I was just interested in Ken just revealed why she got into teaching. What was your route into teaching?
Mine was a little bit strange because actually Auntie Joan or my mum persuaded me not to do teaching.
Mm.
So I was going to go to university originally to do teaching, and she taught me out of it and told me not to do it, to do something different. So I actually went to university and started a different course, and within 2 months had transferred onto the teaching
Oh,
course
right,
because
right.
I actually decided, well, I'll go and do a different degree and then perhaps do a PGC at the end of it.
Mm,
But once I got there and started talking to people, realised that I didn't feel that was the best route in, and I was missing out, and I transferred across to the B.Ed and
right.
did a B.Ed in PE at Carnegie College, and that was, yeah, it was brilliant. So yeah, she did try and convince me not to be a teacher. So we've got quite a difference there, which I'm sure she'll argue about when she hears this, Kendra. But
Well, I
I think
just
probably she did inspire me a little bit. But no, I had some great teachers at school, and I think I can still remember some of those. And I
I
think
was one of them for 2 weeks, but I only
yeah.
did one lesson with Alan. I only did one lesson with Alan because I was in another class and it was absolutely disastrous. And so Alan's teacher took over the class I was teaching, and I took over Alan's class, who were very well behaved.
Absolutely.
Well, I my route in just to complete the trio. I had a lung condition when I was at secondary school, which I just couldn't get rid of. I had to have some major operations on my lungs, primarily because I played a lot of sport, and we were, I think, at the time probably undernourished, and there is some link between getting these spontaneous pneumothoraxes and physical activity and not really being, fed enough. And so I left during A levels and went into a bank, got started doing my banking exams, but I then organised a bank football team, and so we ended up playing other banks around the southeast. And I remember coming back from a match over in Esher or Windsor. We used to take a coach, and the players' families came with their kids, and so all the kids were on the back seat of the coach, and there was only one seat left when I got on, and it was in the middle of the back row. And of course, that journey back convinced me that it was much more fun being surrounded by kids than it was being surrounded by people in banks. So that's what drove me to be a teacher. But also call out to an amazing teacher called Dave Milne, who I still get a Christmas card from, who came over from the grammar school that was opposite at 18 and taught us in what would have been year 10. But this guy was just, amazing historian. It just got me really fired up. And I hadn't really worked very hard up to then, but I certainly got tuned into history because of Dave Milne, an amazing teacher who actually spent his entire career. He went back after training to that school, spent his entire teaching career at that school. Anyway, okay, so I think what we'll do is get into what's caught our eye, because we've sort of given background to everybody's life story here. Let's get straight into it then, Kendra. So what's caught your eye this week?
Well, this week I was looking at Schools Week, and they're running. There's a national competition, and as I've already said, I was a disastrous 2-week long secondary teacher, but this is about secondary education, of which I know very little. But there's a national competition for 11 to 18-year-olds running currently by academics, and it's all about trying to get a solution to plastics going into the ocean, and it's called Ocean Challenge: Prevent Plastics Entering the Ocean. And I just think it's a fascinating thing. I do think that the youth of today have got to take back the reins. It's not working. We all know at the moment the world is a disaster in this country, in most countries. And we've already got teenagers who are massive activists, very well known worldwide. And I just think that these next few generations have got to take the reins, and they've got to help with things, and they'll have the best ideas. Some of the best ideas come from these youngsters, and that sounds really patronising calling them youngsters, but the students of today, they've got to take the reins. They've got to come up. They've got to solve the plastics. They've got to solve the climate change. They've got to do everything within their power and be honest. We need some honesty and integrity back in the world, and I'm convinced that they're the generation that can do it. They can look after us in our dotage, and that competitions like this will hopefully encourage the youngsters to see that they are the future, and that they are fantastic. We've already got there are people in the 20s doing things in the oceans and coming up with ideas, barges with big plastic, not plastic, netting that catches the plastic. And so we just need to advance that. And I'm just passionate about things like that, and but think that we've just let the world down, our generation and the one before us, and we've got to do something. So I think that's an excellent competition. National, any secondary people watching, give it a look up on Schools Week and see if you've got any future engineers, because it's all about engineering, especially girls. Get some girls into it in your secondary.
Get me onto that. We'll have another half hour on this around girls and digital education. But yeah, I mean, it was interesting. This leads in a way to, it was making me think then about a guest we've had on here, I think 2 or 3 times, who's an activist, Isha Asim, who was a student at one of the co-op academies and was head girl at that academy, went on to study law. And she's still politically active, but she had a way in which she was in a school, I have to say, in a school where the head teacher and the senior staff gave voice to the young people. It was, they understood that managing the school could only be done with the support of the student body, you know, and so they encouraged them to take leadership roles, you know, so they were then rehearsing in the way that they were being expected to conduct themselves. They were put in positions where they were having to speak to large groups of students and to staff. You know, the voice of the student was a very important element of that. So I think that, you know, that in a way, for me, it's you're right, but we need also to make sure that they have the mechanism whereby their voice is valued as much as the voice of the adults. You know, at the end of the day, you know, I don't see it as a customer and a user, you know, but actually we are serving them. You know, we're serving their futures and we're serving their families. So we do need to know more about how they're feeling. And at times you feel as though some schools are set up to, this is what's going to happen to you folks, just grin and bear it. You know, we don't really want your voice. You know, this is what we're doing. So,
but some academics are obviously recognising that. If they're running national competitions like this, there are academics in the country that are recognising that the people of the generation beneath them, they're the ones that could come up with the solutions.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. Go on, Anna, you going to say something there, or was that just?
Well, yeah, it's that whole linking, isn't it, to which you can do, particularly with the secondary curriculum. You know, I've noticed through my work is that purpose for learning, and actually, what value is this going to have on your future life? And if we can really embrace ideas like you've just said there, Kendra, and encourage our students to get involved, they can actually see that this is going to make a difference. And when I've been into secondary schools and talked to the pupils and students in secondary schools, why are you learning this? Why? And the difference between, because I've got to, it's for the exam, you know, and yet I went into one school recently where I'm in massive success with their catering course. And the head said, can you find out why it's successful? And it was really obvious because every child came out of it knowing that it would help them in future life. So some just came out that they could cook some meals, that they could just make meals and be healthy and have healthy meals later in life. Some came out of it knowing that they potentially could have careers out of it. And so it had a real meaning to them and a real purpose for learning. And yet you go into some other lessons and the children just like, well, I've just got to do it for the exam.
Yeah.
And what you're saying there, Kendra, is if we can embrace that and get, you know, students say, let's investigate this, let's find out, because this will change the world, it'll change your futures, then actually we can inspire some real positive learning from it. So yeah, get everybody doing it.
Yeah, I agree. It's triggering in me there that there was this is related to it, but in Blackpool, the council set up a chef's academy because obviously Blackpool being a big hospitality centre, they can't get enough chefs. You know, so young people who had a sort of fairly troubled life through school suddenly would go to the chef's academy, which was set up like it was a proper kitchen. It's the expectations were incredibly high. It still runs today. They're trying to get a second one because they just were overflowing with applications, you know. But that when you put young people into an environment where they can see the quality and they can see the pathway, you're right. They suddenly think, oh, you know. And also, I do remember when I left school, when I went into that bank, suddenly I could understand the purpose of the learning, you know, the mathematics. Suddenly I was having to work out interest rates and, you know, and all this sort of stuff. Suddenly I had to.
But you weren't doing quadratic equations and cos and what
if you start using that sort of language, it's a bit of a turn off for me.
But you know, in the chef's college and in that school, that, you know, I pray that they don't have to get pass English. They don't have to pass their English. They don't have to pass their maths. Because, I mean, I know of a young lady who recently, she hasn't enjoyed school. She's not got the grades that everyone would want, but she's a bright, sociable young lady. And she's trying to get an apprenticeship. And it's all about the English, passing your English. No. She might never pass her English. She might do. She might not. But let her do. So I think she's interested in catering.
Right.
But everything they've looked at, they talk about her English. It's like, no, just let her get on doing the thing that being passionate. She loves animals. Let her do something with animals. Get an apprenticeship with animals. Forget the English, please.
Yeah,
It's not relevant.
a lot of this is around business as well, isn't it? It is the apprenticeship route, but it's also like the T-level route as well. That's blocked, and too many businesses simply just say, oh well, this is a good cut-off. We're probably going to have 300 applicants for these 10 jobs. It's easy to just say, well, if you haven't got level 5, it doesn't have to be level 4. It can be level 5 or level 6. If you haven't got level 5 or level 6 in mind, we're not even going to shortlist you. So there needs to be a sea change. We've got ourselves into a really sort of a simplistic approach to staff selection, course selection. And I tweeted this week that, again, something that I heard a couple of weeks ago, you probably saw it, Kendra. A woman came up to me after I gave a presentation, and she, a relative of hers, had got a level 2 in childcare in year 11 with a distinction, but didn't get a maths. So when they went to college, she wanted to do level 3 childcare, but couldn't because she didn't have the maths. There's and then we wonder why the skills shortage is there, why young people feel demotivated. You can't study what you're interested in because you haven't got one exam. And just, if I may just finish, I was mentioning this story to a family member who's works in the probation service, got a very high degree at Loughborough University. When she came out of Loughborough, wanted to do speech therapy, but because she didn't get a B in biology, even though she got a 2-1 in Loughborough, she wasn't able to get on the course. Now I'm thinking, what the hell is all that about? That is really ridiculous when if we've got a shortage, we need to be opening, not closing stuff down,
It's everything though, isn't it, that, Frank, around recognising people's abilities and not just saying everybody's abilities have to be the same. And, I read that post that you put on, I still call it Twitter. I know it's not. Yeah. But, and it's really sad there because I'm sure within her working environment, she could be given any math skills that she would need to fulfill that role successfully.
Yeah, absolutely.
And yet she would be a real loss to that profession if she's blocked from entering for that one reason. And how demotivating is it to say to somebody you cannot progress because of this other area of learning that you haven't yet established? It's such a shame, and you're right. And we will lose some really talented people. And I listened to a talk a few weeks back about neurodiversity from somebody who was involved in the neurodiversity community, and the amount of talent within that group of people, which could get lost because of this structured way that we have of recruitment at the moment in a lot of our professions, and that we're going to lose some really talented people. When you're talking there about that innovation of changing the world, Kendra, some of the neurodiverse people are the ones that are going to do that.
Yes.
And we're blocking them from progressing, and we're blocking them from joining some of the professions that we need them to be involved in. We're going to lose that talent. So there's many strands to it. I completely agree with you, Frank, there.
Yeah. Okay, well, Alan, what's caught your eye this week?
Well, there are a couple of things, but I think based on what we just talked about there, I'm going to go with my monkey one, which is a study that I've read about the infinite monkey theorem, which is a theorem that's been established for a long time, which is that if you put a monkey in front of a keyboard and left him to randomly, or him, to randomly press the keyboard, eventually it would type out the complete works of Shakespeare. Now, there has been a study released this week.
Forsooth! Sorry.
It's all right. That's probably the only Shakespeare you do know, Kendra.
I'm not editing that.
Can I just point out I do have an English degree?
No, okay.
And I'm going to Stratford next week to see Othello. Oh. Go on, Alan, sorry.
Carry on. Anyway, some researchers in Sydney have been looking into this. So this just links back to that valuable use of intelligence and talent. And some researchers have looked at it, and they discovered that actually they cannot say it's impossible, because anything is possible through probability over time. But the length of time it would take a monkey or a chimpanzee to do that would be beyond the lifespan of our universe. So they've discovered it's probably not going to happen. Now, I'm not a great mathematician. I'm not a researcher, but I probably could have told you that. But realistically, that's one thing. Second,
I've got a vision of a skeletal monkey because the monkeys have died after about 15 years.
But my other thing is, do we need to know it?
Yeah.
Is that something really that we want researchers spending their time on discovering? When, I mean, Kendra's picked on a perfect point there. We need to be changing the world. We need to be saving our environment. We need to be doing things that will make a difference rather than having this wonderful sort of intelligent people. And I imagine a whole department of people who've looked into that, because it talks about the fact that they'd based it on the global population of 200,000 chimpanzees. And there's a 5% chance in their lifetime they might type the word bananas. It's just not information we need to know, and it just seems a waste of talent.
Well,
so it kind of links back to all those things we've just said. What we need to know.
No, but Alan, it's valued because it's knowledge.
Okay.
It's knowledge.
Yeah, useless knowledge.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it comes down to, and I mean, I don't know where we'll get to, but when Kendra and I were talking about coming on today, one thing I said to Kendra, I'd love to talk about is, I always ask that question: is it most important for a child to be able to identify a fronted adverbial or to be able to identify an oak tree? Which one? Because I've been to schools where children can do one and not the other. Yeah. And that's really, to me, is quite sad.
Yeah. I think also when I spoke about this about 6 months ago, I was so proud of the fact that I'd been able to convert some wood, a scaffolding sort of sheet, into a planter. All right. Now you might say, most people can do that, but actually, I'm not sure that any of my grandchildren have ever picked up a saw. They simply cannot. I don't think they've ever been taught how to cut wood. And I think, well, it's a basic sort of primitive thing, isn't it, really? That actually they probably, picking up on your point, through their primary school, they have learned an awful lot of stuff, most of which, certainly in English, they don't apply in their secondary schools. Primary school teachers have a better understanding of grammar than secondary school teachers do. There's absolutely no doubt about that. So the kids have learned a lot of the nuances of our language that they won't apply. But so much of the stuff that would be of value to them later in their life, they've not had a single touch of.
Absolutely. I mean, I've had a couple of discussions in schools recently where looking at sort of the DT aspect, but looking at the food technology. And the number of schools, primary schools particularly, that children still don't actually do any physical cooking.
I know.
An adult will still put it in the oven for them, or the adult will do the cooking because, we haven't got time, or, it's health and safety. And actually I'm saying, but these are children who, once they go to high school, a lot of these children, and there's probably a lot of children in Key Stage 2 who already do it, but still a lot of these children will be going home after school and they'll be having to make their own food. And we're not giving them the skills to do that.
Yes.
And that's what we're losing out on, some of these really important life skills.
They do need them. And I mean, for me, the oak tree every time, forget your frontal adverbials, what they recognise the oak tree every time. But I was at church a couple of weeks ago talking to a lovely, lovely gentleman about education. Basically it was about how intelligent he was, and he'd gone to a grammar school, and he'd done Latin, and you can imagine what he's like when, I mean, if we're putting a leaflet out or doing anything at church, he writes it, and his knowledge is phenomenal, and he thinks that we should be teaching Latin now in schools, or bits of it, the history. And I've said no, it's actually the opposite. We are at the moment absolutely killing the fun and enjoyment, the creativity, the imagination of children by teaching them things like frontal adverbials, things like that, far too young. It's like they've brought the secondary education now down to about year 4, I think. And so that preparation that's got to go in from early years to year 4 is just phenomenal, and it's just killing the fun. So when I know I've not been ahead now for 8 years, but we wrote our own curriculum in that school because I just disagree so strongly, so passionately that you have one curriculum for all. And in that curriculum is frontal adverbials, and there isn't how to identify an oak tree. And there's too many objectives. There's too much for teachers to teach. So other than English, maths and science, we had 10 objectives for each subject that had to be taught each academic year properly, taught properly alongside English, maths and science. And it was appropriate for those children. It was relevant to their life. It was relevant to their future life. And on the front of the curriculum, I just wrote, we pay due regard to the national curriculum. Well, we put it in the bin, but never mind. We paid due regard to it. But, and we were inspected 4 times, and they loved the curriculum and they thought it was appropriate for the children. And it just drives me mad. And I know now that they'll have gone back to the national curriculum and it not being appropriate and all these English things that we're teaching. Sorry, I'm on a rant now. It just drives me mad.
I think it's an area, Kendra, where you and I are very similar in terms of our view of the curriculum. So, you know, the school where I was, the last substantive headship post I had, we wrote our own curriculum and we based it entirely. We were very lucky in terms of where we were located. We were a 5-minute walk from a river. We were a 20-minute walk from Sutton Hoo. We've got castles in the local area. And we've got some, you know, a whole range of sort of history and geography. And we just said, right, let's look at the history and geography of our local area. Yeah. And we wrote our curriculum completely based around that. And the theory behind was to start off with the local things, give the children the knowledge that they need to know their local area, but to be aspirational to want to explore the world beyond and get them out there. And it just meant we could do far many more trips because, you know, so we had to put, you know, two educational trips every sort of term locally and then a little bit beyond that. But it was all there on the doorstep. So why not teach them about it? Why not give them something that's got meaning that they can relate to? They can then go home and say to the people at home, come on, I'll go and show you this and we'll go and see it together. And it had far much more meaning. But I'm sure, like you said, Kendra, unfortunately, you see now so many curriculums that are just being rolled out as a standard curriculum, everybody teaching the same thing, and it's just losing relevance.
We're going to move on because we're going to run out of time here.
Sorry.
It's tricky for me. I've got a presentation to give for a trust in 2 weeks' time, and they wanted me to just reflect on my sort of career. It's been a lovely way of just, you know, picking out some themes and how things have shifted and changed. But in 2000, before I left headship, the school I was head of, we won the school's curriculum award. And I had really little idea what the school's curriculum award was when we went for it. It was a member of staff was keen to do it. And but it was the most amazing sort of learning experience for me, because basically the school's curriculum award is primarily around community. So young people understanding their community, how their community developed over time. So you work back from the child's experiences back into time, as opposed to saying, like in a history curriculum where we're going to do the Romans. Well, why are we doing the Romans? You know, in a way for young people, you know, actually, why is that bridge there? You know, why? And in where we were, we had a mining community, Poynton. Never thought that it was open cast mining in Poynton. There was an old railway line which was just a path at the end of the field. You know, and children were using that path without realizing it used to be an old mining line to the main railway line. And so in a way, you know, you get a feeling of, well, yeah, let's start with the here and now. You know, let's understand our community. Let's understand why our place is what it is, and take it back to the Romans, rather than say we're going to do the Romans. Well, why? Well, because we've been told we've got to do the Romans, you know, and then try and connive it back to, well, this is relevant for Poynton. You know, it really is the wrong way round of looking at this. Anyway, let me finish then with a plug. Yesterday we did another spotlight and we talked to Phil Naylor, who's written this pretty amazing book called Some Schools Are Harder Than Others. And Phil is a senior leader in a very challenging secondary school in the Northwest. And basically, he's gone and spoken to a host of people who are working in really challenging environments, but actually their schools are successful. So, and he looks at it from, well, how did you get the IT system to work so well? Why is Send working okay in your school? So it's a really interesting read, and we're going to put that up next week. But the other thing is, I have with Professor Colin Richards an article in the TES this week, and here we're talking about the Gilbert Learning Review, which was produced following the Ofsted's feeble attempt at trying to manage the process around Ruth, the head teacher at Caversham Primary School's death. And so Christine Gilbert, former chief inspector, was asked to do a learning review of the process that Ofsted got themselves into. I tell you what, it's well worth a read, because it really unpicks, culture. It unpicks weak governance, weak oversight, poor the management structure within the inspectorate was not equipped to cope with these sorts of things, and so what I and Colin Richards have done is we've looked at the governance arrangements highlighted by Christine, and we've said they're not fit for purpose. So where is the change? So what is happening? There's nothing happening. I know that our paper, we've written a much longer piece, which is on the Alternative Big Listen website. I'll put a link at the end of the chat. But we've written a much longer piece, which gives clear examples of the relationship between key individuals being far too close, a lack of transparency around appointments, a lack of challenge from board members, lack of clarity about what the board does, which actually is, some board members described it as their role being limited. A board member appointed by government, overseeing the work of an inspectorate, dealing with safeguarding issues in social care, residential care, having limited challenge to the chief inspector. So you can see all these problems emerging that sort of came together at Caversham, but they've been simmering for years. And I think many of us who've worked for the inspectorate have understood this, and only those of us who've left feel able to speak out about it. There are a lot of people who've worked for the inspectorate as HMI will probably agree and drop me a note saying well done, but not willing to go out in public and say well done, But actually, I think there's some serious sort of issues here about how we appoint not just Ofsted's chief inspector, but every chief inspector, every regulator, whether that's Ofwat, Ofqual, all of this, the whole process coming out of 14 years of a conservative, controlled government. We need to unpick all of this and make it much more transparent and open, so we have greater confidence in the people who are actually got these positions, and the people who are meant to be challenging them and holding them to account seriously do hold them to account, and don't have a relationship with them which was built up from before they got their job. It's pretty awful. So I'd urge you all to go to the Alternative Big Listen. It's the alternativebiglisten.co.uk website, and you will see the sort of, it's only about 3 pages, but it unpicks some very clear examples of why it's not fit for purpose. So yeah,
I've read it, Frank, and it just smacks to me that it's all a bit incestuous, really, and who and going back to Sir Michael Wilshaw,
yeah.
and how he became chief inspector. He didn't do that willingly.
He didn't apply for the job, did he?
No, he didn't even apply for
out.
it. It's like who what I'll scratch your back, you scratch my back, and it's just all a bit mucky at the minute.
Yeah, the thing for me all along this is that not just Ofsted but other regulators are accountable to Parliament. So they Ofsted reports every year on the effectiveness of services for children and young people to Parliament. And if you want to make sure that we don't find out about some really awful things, then the best thing to do is to actually get a very compliant chief inspector.
Mm.
Who isn't willing to call out, who isn't willing to hold to account, who isn't willing to speak without fear or favour. So I think you might say, I think some people might say, well, this is a bit technical, isn't it? But actually, we all know in schools, good governing bodies tend to appoint or create good head teachers, and great head teachers manage to create better governing bodies. There's an interconnection between all of these. When they can't, then challenge occurs. The head teacher is challenged by the governing body, or the head teacher saying to them, "You're simply not doing your job well enough." These sorts of conversations are really helpful. But if you get a situation which is very compliant, where actually the board feel as though, well, I don't think this is very good, but actually don't have a mechanism or don't have the structure to actually sort of challenge, because actually the chief inspector sees themselves as a sort of CEO without, who actually can do whatever they want. Actually we face then serious problems for young people and children in terms of their safety and the safety of the staff that work within them. For me, it's I know what I'm pleased about is I know the Secretary of State has read that longer piece.
Yeah,
that's all you can do. We're a voice, aren't we? We come on here because we want to feel as though I come on every week to make people feel as though there is somebody speaking on their behalf. Half of it,
So I think you do that, and your ex HMI colleagues. I mean, I do say it in tweets, but do you know why they're not these really sensible, experienced people being listened to? They need to be listened to. People with experience, integrity, professional.
We're seen as an irritant, to be honest. We're an irritant.
Well, I'm going to say that's why they don't get the positions, because they will challenge, and that's ultimately why they don't want that. They don't want that independent challenge, and they don't want that different opinion coming in. So it's better appoint what we know and who we can control rather than
what's sad, Alan. Moving it off from Ofsted, but I think what Kendra was saying, we need better services, and we need people who are willing to support and challenge in order to get that. And I saw last night on Question Time, a minister very, very clearly state, he could easily walk away from all of this. It's a mess. National Health Service is a mess. Well, what do? Do you walk away, or do you speak up? And actually, what he's saying is, I could easily walk away. I don't have to sit in front of 200 people and answer all these questions on live on television. But actually, I'm doing it because I genuinely want the service to be better, and I genuinely want everybody to feel as though when they get Ofsteded, they have confidence that the system will be fair to them and to the children. And I just don't feel that at the moment.
It's a long way.
A long way away.
Absolutely. Okay. Even with the changes. Anyway, talking about it's all about who. Thank you, Kendra, for inviting me on as your guest, cousin Kendra. That was.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say we'll have to look at the governance arrangements for this.
Absolutely,
chat, won't we? I think.
Well, I'm not happy to walk away. I'm happy to keep banging my drum.
Absolutely, Kendra. I think it's difficult when you're in the sector and you're accountable to other people. And we're all.
I think that with Alan's role now, because you're a school advisor now, aren't you, Alan?
Yep.
What do you call them down in Suffolk? School improvement officers.
Standards and excellence partners.
There you go. Yeah. He's a standards and excellence partner, but it's like you have to be careful what you say, but you have passions and you are passionate, and I know for a fact that you want the best for children. In all schools, you want the best for them, but in some respect, in a role like that, you've still got to follow a bit of the party line, haven't you? And be careful what you say, and it's just difficult, I think.
Completely, yeah. You've got to fit it in with the agenda, the sort of national agenda, the local, government agenda as well. So it's combining that, but still, like you say, sharing your own passion. And just trying to get that passion through with leaders in schools and keep that constant focus on my always big thing as a leader was, what difference does it make for the children? And if it's not going to make a difference for them, why do it?
Yeah.
You know, that's what it comes down to at the end of the day.
In my talk that preparing, I remember when I was going for my first headship, I was quite young, and the advisor in Stockport came to me knowing that I'd got an interview in Trafford for a headship in a really challenging school. And he said, well, what's your educational philosophy, Frank? I was completely stumped by that question. But it was a very helpful prompt about making me think about what my educational philosophy was. And I think that I'm not sure that when I speak to some prospective heads and even some heads, that they're clear about what their educational philosophy is. And they are very much driven by, I need to do this in order to get a good grade. It's not what I want to do. It's not what I believe in, but I'm doing. So hang on, you're doing this even though you don't believe. Yeah, I've got to do it because this is going to get me a good grade. I think that's where, we need more people thinking about what their educational philosophy is, what their vision for the future is. Because if you're not careful, you'll get buffeted around by one Ofsted framework, one departmental requirement. If you're not careful, that's why I think people like you, Alan, doing the job you're doing with the local authority heads or even with head teachers is so important, to push that. Well, what are your beliefs? What are your principles? Where are your values in all of this?
It is, and again, Joe, you should have experienced the same. And when we were on the other side, I certainly had an advisor who came into me and recommended I did something, and I asked why, and she said, "Well, because Ofsted will like it."
Yeah.
And it was kind of, well, you've just given me the exact, now I'm not going to do it. You've just answered the question yourself there. I'm not going to do it because it's not making a difference to the children in our school, and everything we do should make a difference to them. I'm not going to do anything just to tick a box. And we've got to get that message out there, because
that's probably a good point to end on, isn't it?
Mhm.
Yeah. So thank you very much. It's a much longer chat than normal. No, that's great, Kendra. No problem with that at all.
It's always going to be with Kendra on, Frank, isn't it?
Thank you, Kendra. Thank you, Alan, for joining us.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Hopefully, all being well, Stan will be back with us next week, and we have a couple of guests next Friday. One of whom is a head teacher of a large school in a large city in the north, and also an academic is joining us as well. So I'm looking forward to that. So until next week, it's goodbye from all of us. Cheerio, everyone. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.
Bye.